And you have to know how to balance that because players like that, it's just almost impossible to get it right. You have to be on more, I would say, on the conservative side. Otherwise, you're going to end up overpaying for the player, and there's going to be no profit in that.
Yeah, how are you using Otani, Tristan, in your leagues? And how are you evaluating him?
So, I mean, the fact that he had such a disappointing year and then he has the injury question kind of casting the shadow over his pitching ability makes him very difficult to rank for me. I actually, I kind of wish that the Angels would just let him hit because I think he's a pretty special player just on his own right there. Otani, and you mentioned Rich Hill a minute ago, they're important names to bring up in terms of the league context as well. So, Ariel, this is a great point about using an auction calculator. As I describe in my Excel spreadsheet, I have one that does that. It actually does account for the league context. I don't think that enough people who attempt to create their own dollar values and rankings off a set of projections consider the league context enough. Because the advantage to a player like Otani or Rich Hill is that generally when they're hurt and they're out, you can replace them. And if you're in a league that has a pretty deep replacement pool, so for example, the ESPN Standard League, which is 10 teams, it's not difficult to get good quality replacement value players right off the waiver wire. And when you have Otani, and generally, I don't know that I'd say it now for Rich Hill, but 2-3 years ago, when Rich Hill was healthy, he was great. So if you attach him to a good replacement level player in an ESPN 10-team standard mixed league, Rich Hill is worth a lot more there than he would be, for example, in a 12-team AL only, where if you're missing him, it's going to get a little bit ugly. You're probably going to be leaning on a middle reliever. So, they're different guys. I think in Otani's case, he's tough just because I'm coming from the universe for ESPN where you have to lock him in for X period of time as either a hitter or a pitcher. You can't use him as both. You have to decide which stats are important to you. I can manipulate the games played in the daily format for that. He's a difficult guy to rank. We'll probably get into another guy who's very difficult to rank in the show in a little bit too. But Otani's definitely one of the most difficult to rank just because of the variable role, the injury, and just the way that you use him across different leagues. There's leagues that allow you to use him as two separate players, a hitter in one and a pitcher as another player within the same league. It's tough to nail him down to one number.
Right. If you do have a league, let's say the ESPN Standard 10-team league, that are you drafting, and let's say, I'm not sure what the rules on ESPN, it might be that you can use them either or, but not in the same week. Are you drafting him to be used as a hitter, or are you drafting him to be used as a pitcher? I would think hitter.
I'm drafting him because I could use him either way. So in the ESPN game, the advantage would be that on the days he pitches, he's probably not going to be the DH. They're not going to waive that to have him bat. So I know that day I can use him as a pitcher, and then on the next day, if he's the designated hitter, I throw him in at DH. We have the daily lineup thing. So in the ESPN leagues, you actually can maximize Shohei Ohtani's value. And the ones where you have to pick for the week, I think he's a lot less valuable. And the other thing, too, in our points structure, he's a lot more valuable.
Right. Oh, for sure, Ohtani in a daily league is miles ahead of him in a weekly league. Yep. How do you evaluate that? How do you evaluate Ohtani in terms of an auction dollar context? How do you evaluate him in terms of daily versus weekly?
So I think it's a pretty wide gap. If and I'm not thinking about him in terms of a dollar price here, but in the ESPN ranking context, we're talking about at least a 5-round swing between whether it's a daily or a weekly transaction league. And you can do either one of these in the game. I would say from a dollar value perspective, he's going to have one of the widest gaps between that. I would say off the top of my head, it's a $7 or $8 difference.
Right. My math on that would be in a weekly league, you would give him the maximum of whatever his value is as a pitcher or hitter alone. But in terms of a daily league, you would almost add up the values of his hitting and pitching statistics minus $1 or so as he'll occupy, plus $1 as he'll only occupy one roster spot, and you can almost essentially use him as both. So he almost gets the sum of both his values. As you said, it's tremendous. And your $7, $8 thing is pretty close because I have Ohtani right now looking as about an $8 hitter, about a $1.02 pitcher. So there you go. There's that gap right there. Our episode tonight is our market premium episode, and it's a term, market premium, that I use a lot, but I figured we get a little bit into the nitty-gritty of it and talk about strategy of how to use it, define it, and whatnot on the show. So if you will, follow me on this one. The general concept of a market premium is as follows. If you go to a jewelry store, gold costs a certain amount, silver costs a certain amount, diamond costs a certain amount, and so forth, so on and so forth. My grandfather, who was a watchmaker for over 60 years, he worked in a jewelry store, and I always remember him telling me, he said, Ariel, an item is only worth as much as people are willing to pay for it. Meaning there's no really intrinsic value of it. It's just as much as it's going to go for, as much as people are willing to spend for it. So, the question is, what speedsters, people who steal a lot, they're expensive in drafts. And that is because essentially people pay up for them. That's really the reason, right? Closers are going more expensive essentially because people pay up for them, we think at least. And that's sort of what the market premium concept is. The definition that I'll give you is a market premium is an additional value that the market is paying for a commodity, in this case, a certain position, like a shortstop, or a certain statistic, like a stolen base, above what you would determine as the inherent value for the commodity. So if you do your auction calculations and you think a player is worth $20 who steals, but yet the market is paying $25 for them, and they're pretty much a one-trick pony, the market premium for steals is about $5 if you find that on average. So, first of all, just wanted to get your take on what you think of that concept, Tristan, and how you might find that in leagues that you draft.
I think it's a good description of this concept. I do witness this more so in my auction leagues than I do in my draft leagues. And often the more shallow the league, the less likely you're going to see this concept take hold. So, for example, in labor and tout wars, leagues that are deeper, leagues that are auction-driven, I do see this happen a lot. There's usually a bigger premium placed on things like steals especially, and often position scarcity, which I think is overrated almost to the point that it's a myth. I'd argue it's, frankly, at this point, a total myth. We see it a little bit more in those. And it frustrates me because it forces me to take a different approach to building around those categories, those positions. If I feel that everybody's going to, for example, pay up for all the speedster shortstops, I have to kind of zag because they're all zigging. I guess the best way to put this is I'm a big baseball card guy. I have been for years. And once the market got flooded and then they went to these specialized cards and everybody was paying for autographs and, like fancy, whatever, chrome things, I'd be the guy sifting through the bargain bin there. And it's the same approach to fantasy and at the auction table, is that if you're just going to go and pay up a premium, I'm going to try to sift through that and get the little bargains you let sneak through, because I'm pretty sure that there's going to be some. And I've gotten caught on that at times. And I've been left with that, 88 tops worthless card, the fantasy equivalent of that. But, more often than not, I'm going to find the value.
All right, so 3 points, though, to make. One, the market premium is specific to each league. There are home leagues that I play in, Ruvain plays in with me, that pitchers just don't go high at all. But if we play in the NFBC, my God, there could be 5 pitchers taken in the first round. So it's very specific to the league itself. Number 2, it is not the replacement level position scarcity concept. That in and of itself is a different discussion, and I agree with you, Tristan. There really doesn't exist, other than catchers. Catchers, obviously, there is a scarcity element to that, but it's a different concept to that. It's just people paying over what really they should be paying because there's just a small amount of quantity of players that fit a certain description or category or whatnot. The third
point, interrupting you on that one. In your leagues, you have not experienced the unusually large inflation on middle infielder. I do have home leagues you mentioned as an example. I have had that experience where I felt that they were being vastly priced up.
I do, and I'm going to consider that a market premium, not as positional scarcity, because I don't believe in positional scarcity for middle infielders right now, because the replacement level is really even with everybody else. That's a market premium, and I think it's unwarranted. So, and we'll talk a little bit about each position on today's show. That's a case where I would not pay up for these middle infielders because I think there's a market premium that I don't want to pay.
It makes sense. I think we're kind of saying a little of the same thing on that. It's
right.
I've seen in extreme examples, especially the home leagues, occasionally the more casual ones, people will get carried away even with just positions as opposed to categorical. But we're on the same page there.
Right. And basically what I'm not disagreeing with you. I think I agree with everything you say there. I'm just defining it as it's a market concept, not as a inherent value difference because of scarcity, right? I'm just changing the verbiage for it, right?
Sure.
Now, the other thing I'll say that is it's not that I don't want to pay a market premium. It's that the key to winning at fantasy baseball is paying less of a market premium than anybody else. So take closers, and maybe let's start with closers in our discussion here. Closers are needed because saves are a category. If you're playing rotisserie baseball 5x5, you need saves. So you can't, unless you want to get a 0, which is not really a great plan, you need to get some saves. So let's say you determine that, my goodness, closers are going 3 rounds above what they should, or there's a $6 market premium to go closers. It's okay to pay a market premium, just that if everybody's paying on average $6, don't be the one who pays 6 or 8. Be the one who pays 3. So it's okay to overspend on a position because it's a premium position, but just be sure that relative to the other people in that position, pay 3. I mean, when I go to an auction with Ruvain, we say, all right, here's a list of a couple of closers. Here's what we think they're worth. We know the market premium is X. We just want to be on the low side. So as soon as a closer comes up, we'll bid up to what we think is under the market premium, and so on and so forth. So with the closer example, let's go to you, Ruvain, first. What do you think is the right way to play closers? Obviously, we need them, and we know that closers are not a very reliable source. They're very iffy. When you do projection valuations, they always say that you're paying a huge premium for closers. What is the right approach for you?
At draft day, it's quantity over quality. Try to get as many as possible because in the beginning of the year, all these closers usually have their quote-unquote jobs, and that's when you get probably most of your saves. Yes, they're the top few closers that are, I guess, sort of reliable. You want to throw Kenley Jansen in there. You want to throw, Brad Hand in there. You want to throw Alex Colomé. These are people who are consistent. They're not premium closers. They're not necessarily the top. I mean, Hand was. But Jansen last year was actually undervalued for what everyone was, he made money for people because people weren't paying the premium. They were paying premium for Liam Hendricks, who actually hit. They were paying premium for Josh Hader, who ended up with 13 saves. They were paying a premium for Edwin Diaz, who ended up with an extremely low amount of saves. So I think when it comes to a draft, I wouldn't pay the premium. I just get a lot of quantity over quality.
All right, so Tristan, what is your approach on closers, and how would that relate to this concept of market premium?
So, yeah, now where I see the market premium is most often in my home leagues. The closer position is the one where people are most apt to overpay for the lesser tiered players, and they often fear paying the premium for one of the better types. So my take is, if you've done your homework and you actually have the right prices and the right tiers at that position, you should be fine. It is easy to just sit back there and wait for that value to fall in your lap. It's a little bit like my quarterback case in fantasy football. It's not quite the depth of the position so it's not a perfect parallel, but it's that approach of sitting back and waiting for the value to come to you. Because I'll often say, I want to be in that middle to low tier. I don't want to pay for my saves. I want to fill it on the cheap. I'll get guys during the year. It's often not as easy as you think. You have everybody chasing after you in terms of fab during the year, or if you're in a waiver system by waivers, you might not be able to get the pieces you need in order to do it. And I'll often find that people are paying for that third-tier closer effectively the same amount you would for a high-end second-tier closer. The minute the top closer goes for $15, and that's happened in a couple of the leagues where I had them at $20, $21, they go for $15. I'll throw a good example of a guy I like this year, Lucas Sims. He's not even guaranteed to be the closer for the Reds this year, but I like him. The minute the top closer goes for $15 in my league, which I consider a bargain, I could see somebody in my league getting caught up and spending 10 or 11 on Lucas Sims. And to me, that's the mistake. So I'd rather have you tell me that the top guy is the bargain, or maybe it's the 7th, maybe it's the 8th, maybe it's the 9th. It's one position where I am open-minded. I'm going to try to be as cheap as I can, but I'm just going to let you give me the value.
Right, and I think that really plays well into this market premium aspect, that you know what the market premium is, and you just want to be on the bottom end of it anywhere you can, right?
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah.
Right. I'll say, though, in playing NFBC high-stakes stuff, I would say that over the last couple of years, the market premium was lowest in the second-tier closers. So if you look at the top 1, 2, 3, 4 closers, you have to pay a nice market premium. Then there's a little bit of a lull where you can get some nice bargains. It drops. But then that third batch of closers, people get scared because once the second tier run out, everyone's like, oh, God, I got to grab a closer right now. Yet their value is much lower.